Vaccine shortage concerns. New powers for the European Union could block shipments to Australia, but the government is confident the rollout will go ahead smoothly.
Minister Hunt is keeping in contact with the country leads for both Pfizer and AstraZeneca on a day-to-day basis.
Johnson & Johnson shares promising results from the first single-shot vaccine, but will Australia sign up for it? China refuses to recognise new British passports for Hong Kongers, claiming they would turn residents into second-class British citizens. And Shell ordered to compensate farmers for major oil spills in the Niger Delta.
This is SBS World News with Darren Mara.
Good evening. The fight over limited COVID-19 vaccine supplies has intensified, with the European Union granting itself the power to block the export of vaccines made on the continent. Australia is not included in the list of 120 countries exempt from the EU decision. And now Australian health authorities say they have sought assurances that its current schedule remains on track.
Across Europe, people are waiting for their COVID jabs, but supplies are limited, in some areas non-existent.
La incapacidad de dos grandes empresas para suministrar las dosis necesarias a la velocidad necesaria ha sido un palo tremendo. El no cumplir estos plazos nos deja otra vez a merced de la pandemia durante un tiempo que no conocemos.
The European Union has been under pressure to act. Its solution? Companies who manufacture vaccines in the EU, like Pfizer at this Belgian facility, will require export approval before vials can be sent abroad.
The aim is to provide us immediately with full transparency. Transparency that until now has been lacking and what Europeans expect. And if needed, it also will provide us with a tool to ensure vaccine deliveries.
Brussels believes it's a way to ensure its orders are fulfilled before stock is sent elsewhere. But if a manufacturer refuses to hand over data on how many doses are being shipped overseas and where they're going, then export authorisation could be refused.
I'm afraid that could become a lose-lose situation rather than a win for Europe situation. The supply chains are very, very complicated. We are importing in Europe from multiple other countries to be able to do vaccines for all.
92 countries are exempt from the regulation, but not the UK.
This is an incredibly hostile and aggressive act by the European Union bloc.
Nor Australia, which is due to receive its first doses from Belgium next month.
All deliveries are, of course, subject to global production and shipping processes. The projections which we have are cautious and conservative. Minister Greg Hunt has reconfirmed this morning that Australia's current vaccine schedule is on track. He's reconfirmed this with the country heads of both Pfizer and AstraZeneca.
Sweden's former Prime Minister tweeting, "I had hoped not to see Europe leading the world down the destructive path of vaccine nationalism." The WHO agrees.
Vaccine nationalism might serve short-term political goals, but it's ultimately short-sighted and self-defeating.
The export rules are the result of a dispute between Brussels and the maker of the Oxford vaccine, AstraZeneca, over supply shortfalls. The EU's medicines regulator has only just approved the jab for anyone over the age of 18, despite German health authorities suggesting it be limited to those under 65 due to a lack of efficacy data for the elderly. It's the third vaccine approved for use in Europe.
None of them is perfect. None of them is a magic wand on its own, but together they provide tools and options to prevent different aspects of the disease.
They only work if they're available. The EU is desperate to fill these fridges with vials. Export controls might help do that, but at the risk of triggering an all-out vaccine war. In London, Ben Lewis, SBS World News.
A new single-shot vaccine has been thrown into the mix, with Johnson & Johnson claiming its vaccine is highly effective in preventing death and hospitalisations. US health officials are applauding the clinical results despite a lower efficacy rate than other vaccine candidates. The company is now seeking emergency approval in the US next week.
It's a new weapon in the fight against COVID-19. Johnson & Johnson's Yansen vaccine is unlike others. It only requires a single shot and doesn't need cold storage. It was tested in the world's worst-hit regions, including the United States, South America and South Africa, where a new strain is spreading.
Across the three regions, we saw a very high efficacy against severe disease, death and hospitalization.
The vaccine is 66% effective in preventing the virus, 85% against severe disease and 100% effective in preventing deaths and hospitalizations. The Pfizer vaccine, one of 4 set to be rolled out in Australia, is about 95% effective in preventing symptomatic illness.
That might not seem as good as 95%, but the important part of the whole thing was that for advanced severe disease, it was quite effective.
This vaccine, as a single jab, is being touted as crucial for countries with struggling health systems and low vaccination rates.
The need for one-dose options is more great in low-income countries and very remote settings where or in populations where it's very difficult to get people back for a second dose. That really isn't the case in Australia.
It's also been tested against new variants, unlike some earlier clinical trials.
It's really important to realise those studies were done at a different time, under different circumstances, and they might or might not come out the same now.
Johnson & Johnson will seek emergency approval in the United States next week.
Then it's up to the FDA. I don't want to get ahead of them and predict what they'll do, but the data look robust enough that they likely will go ahead with it, which means probably by sometime mid to end February, we start to be getting some doses in.
Australian authorities say they're confident with their existing vaccine deals.
It's very early in the process still for that Johnson & Johnson vaccine. They're just providing announcements for their phase 3 trials.
In further promising results, the Novavax jab has now been shown to be almost 90% effective in large-scale trials in the United Kingdom. The studies showed it's also 86% effective at protecting against the new UK variant. Australia has ordered 51 million doses of the double-shot vaccine to be rolled out this year. Rashida Yousafzai, SBS World News.
Well, COVID-19 cases around the world are rising exponentially, with more cases reported in the past 2 weeks than in the entire first 6 months of the pandemic. But for the virus-ravaged United States, there is some relief. For the first time in months, case numbers are falling.
A late-night freezer failure meant clinics in Seattle had just 8 hours to administer 1,600 doses of the Moderna vaccine, or they would go to waste. Hundreds flocked to clinics for an express jab in their pyjamas. This couple woken by a call from their daughter.
She called me at 11:30, was in bed. Mom, quickly, the appointment is going to be at 1 o'clock. So he didn't have time to dress up.
The rush is also on to find a defence against mutating variants of the virus from the UK and South Africa, expected to soon dominate caseloads.
I think we should be treating every infection as if it's a variant. We know that these viruses are going to mutate. They generally mutate to the advantage of the virus, and that's how we get these more dominant strains.
Fears about fast-spreading variants has led Canada to implement a hotel quarantine strategy.
Travellers will then have to wait for up to 3 days at an approved hotel for their test results at their own expense, which is expected to be more than $2,000.
Germany has banned travellers from countries where the new variants are prevalent, and France has gone a step further.
Toute entrée en France et toute sortie de notre territoire à destination ou en provenance d'un pays extérieur à l'Union européenne sera interdite, sauf motif impérieux. Cela s'appliquera à partir de dimanche 0 heure.
The UK variant is blamed for the rapid spike in cases in Portugal this year. The hospital system now overwhelmed. These critically ill patients flown from the capital Lisbon to the island of Madeira for an ICU bed. As nations struggle to suppress the new variants, the World Health Organization's team of experts has toured the hospital where China says the first COVID-19 patients were treated more than a year ago. But the team's movements will be limited.
They have a following second 14 days where you have restricted movement. So the team will go out, but only where they will be bussed to wherever, so they won't have any contact with the community.
The experts plan to speak with first responders and visit the wet market linked to the first outbreak. Lucy Murray, SBS World News.
Back home, and Western Australia will relax its strict border restrictions with Victoria and Queensland next week. Premier Mark McGowan says both states will transition to a very low-risk category, pending no further outbreaks. From Monday, people will be allowed to enter WA from Queensland without having to quarantine. The same changes will apply to Victoria from Friday. Mr McGowan defending the state's hasty border shutdowns over the Christmas period.
We took no pleasure in what we had to do in order to minimise the risk of an outbreak in WA, especially over such a sensitive and celebratory time of the year.
It's been 265 days since Western Australia's last local case of coronavirus. And nationally, more good news, with the country celebrating an important milestone.
Today is the 13th consecutive day of no cases of COVID-19 being reported in Australia. I'm advised this is the longest stretch of no cases of COVID-19 in our country since March last year.
Australia currently has 72 total active COVID cases, 23 of those from local transmission. Meanwhile, the Victorian government reportedly paid $78 million in wages to hotel quarantine staff for 5 months while the program was suspended. The hotel quarantine operation was largely put on hold during the second coronavirus wave from June to December last year, running only as emergency accommodation. Well, now it's emerged payments were made to more than 1,000 workers, despite there being no flights into Victoria at the time. A government spokeswoman said the staffing was critical to ensure Victoria was prepared for the return of international travellers. Coming up next, a Moscow court puts critics under house arrest as the Kremlin cracks down ahead of more protests to free Alexei Navalny. Hundreds more Rohingya refugees moved by Bangladeshis to an island aid agencies warn is in the typhoon alley. And Italy's cheese boom, how the country's economy is being boosted by this local staple.
Tonight at 7:30, kick off your evening with a brand new season of Going Places with Ernie Dingo. Then at 8, Michael Portillo's Abandoned Britain. And later, Once Upon a Time in America.
Keep your arms up nice and high there.
Take a glimpse inside Britain's busiest A&E department, where frontline workers weave magic.
I'm going to be the only doctor looking after them today, so...
And families pray for miracles.
You only know the full extent of what you've had when you've lost it.
I think that's just life.
The emotionally charged 24 Hours in Emergency starts Monday 8:30 on SBS and on demand.
God be praised. The town is free from this great rascality. Max and Moritz have lots to chew. Soon it's time for trick number 2.
At Harvey Norman, get a PC with Windows 10 for a more powerful you. This Lenovo IdeaPad Slim laptop, great for school students, just $388. Save $260 on this Lenovo laptop with an Intel Core i7 processor, now $888. Or save over $300 on this versatile Lenovo Yoga laptop, powered by 11th Gen Intel Core i5 processor, now $1,488. Plus, get 60 months interest-free with bonus gift cards, now at Harvey Norman.
Go! Calculating route. Continue straight. Return to route.
I don't know if you heard. Did you hear the...
Take first exit.
I think it wants us to take this exit.
There it goes.
Take any exit. Continue straight. 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 Oh, come on.
Turn on the fun with Toyota Corolla. Oh, what a feeling. Toyota.
Hello. No. Have a good day.
Shut up and take my money.
This time of year can really add up. So we're helping to lighten the load. Just a little. With $100 off any new NRMA comprehensive car insurance policy.
Not only are we sleeping less, we are sleeping worse.
Are we sleepwalking into a sleep crisis?
The link between sleep and weight is getting stronger.
Michael Mosley, The Truth About Sleep. Thursday, 8:30 on SBS and on demand.
This is Vienna's Gilded Age. There is something unsettling deep below the surface, a hidden darkness that the city is struggling to hide.
What's your field of study?
The psychopathy of the criminal mind.
Catchy.
Woman shot through the heart at close range. Her door was locked. The key was on the inside.
You're saying we have an invisible weapon and the killer who can pass through walls.
There's more than one illusionist at work here.
A Dutch court has ordered the Nigerian branch of oil giant Shell to compensate local farmers for an oil spill. Shell claims the leaks were the result of sabotage. The case is expected to set a precedent for more farmers whose land and water has been contaminated by thousands of spills over several decades.
Waterways in the Ogoni region of Nigeria are slick with oil. Contractors working for Shell are cleaning up this spill that happened in 2009.
The scope of this work is to remediate the polluted areas in Border Creek, and after that, the next phase will be the restoration, revegetation of the mangroves.
The UN estimates it could take 30 years to clean up the pollution left by half a century of oil operations across Nigeria. 4 farmers from Ogoniland have gone all the way to the Hague Court of Appeal in the Netherlands, arguing that Shell is to blame for spills in their villages in 2004 and 2005. The court found Shell Nigeria is liable.
Shell Nigeria wordt veroordeeld om de schade van de boeren te vergoeden. En de hoogte van de schadevergoeding moet nog nader worden vastgesteld.
Pollution from leaking pipelines continues to be a major issue in the Niger Delta, and Shell was also ordered to install fail-safe equipment. The Farmers' Court case was supported by the environmental group Friends of the Earth. It took place at The Hague because the Netherlands is the base of Royal Dutch Shell, the parent company of Shell Nigeria.
From this moment onwards, Dutch multinationals will be held accountable for their activities and their actions in developing countries.
The case started 13 years ago in 2008 and has been going so long that 2 of the farmers have died, meaning their families will get the compensation for the spills that covered an area of about 60 football fields.
It's very satisfying that we've reached this point. I do hope that they will actually get some compensation soon.
Shell said in a statement that it was disappointed with the court's decision, maintaining that sabotage caused the spills. Pipelines in the Delta are regularly vandalised by people stealing oil, but the court found it could not be proven that saboteurs were to blame for the spills.
In de Oruma-zaken worden Shell Nigeria en Shell moedervennootschap Royal Dutch Shell bevolen om de pijpleiding te voorzien van een lekdetectiesysteem, zodat in de toekomst milieuschade kan worden beperkt.
The fight against oil pollution in Nigeria has not always been settled in court. In 1995, the Nigerian military regime executed 9 local activists who were seeking justice for the Ogoni people. Felicity Ogilvie, SBS World News.
A police officer who died from injuries sustained during the attack on the US Congress will lie in honour at the Capitol. A week out from former President Donald Trump's Senate trial on the charge of inciting insurrection, new video has revealed the intensity of the assault.
Newly released police body cam videos showing the barbarity at the gates of Congress.
Hand-to-hand combat, rioters repeatedly beating police officers. Video played at the court hearing of alleged rioter Michael Foy, a combat-trained Marine with a history of mental health issues. Prosecutors say he attacked an officer with a hockey stick. Rioters seen on top of motionless people, a man begging for help to save a woman. The mob indifferent. 34-year-old Roseanne Boyland did die. For a third time, the FBI increasing its reward for this suspect. Law enforcement revealing that pipe bombs placed at the headquarters of the Republican and Democratic parties were left the night before the Capitol Hill assault. New Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin inspecting the National Guard troops who still patrol the Capitol more than 3 weeks after the attack. But lawmakers bitterly at odds about the upcoming Trump trial after Jacob Chansley, known as the QAnon shaman, indicated he's happy to be a witness. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham tweeting, "I cannot think of a better way to turn the upcoming impeachment trial into a complete circus than to call the QAnon shaman as a witness on anything." The White House endeavouring to steer clear of the upcoming confrontation, new Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen pressing the case for a $1.9 trillion COVID relief package.
And economists agree that if there's not more help, many more people will lose their small businesses, the roofs over their heads, and the ability to feed their families.
President Biden enjoying a moment with his wife Jill, then sounding increasingly determined to get his bill through, with or without Republicans.
I support passing COVID relief with support from Republicans if we can get it, but the COVID relief has to pass. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
His hopes of working with Congress come as Republicans face mounting pressure over their new House member, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's expressed racist views. Democratic Congresswoman Cori Bush, also just elected, shifting offices to get away from her.
What I cannot do is continue to look over my shoulder wondering if a white supremacist in Congress by the name of Marjorie Taylor Greene or anyone else, because there are others, that they are doing something or conspiring against us.
Also condemned by the Republican Jewish Coalition for her rhetoric, Marjorie Taylor Greene in a statement tonight said she will never back down. Pruluan, SBS World News.
Russia is bracing for a second weekend of unrest, with the Kremlin cracking down on supporters of jailed opposition figure Alexei Navalny. Police in Moscow have announced they'll close train stations and streets near the Kremlin ahead of more planned protests tomorrow. And a Russian court has ordered Mr. Navalny's brother and other close allies be placed under house arrest.
Inside a Moscow court, Alexei Navalny's close allies with small acts of defiance. His brother Oleg rolling his eyes. Campaigner Lyubov Sobol in her own silent dissent. A member of the punk band Pussy Riot, arms crossed. And a day after playing the piano as police banged on her door, Mr. Navalny's personal doctor, again calm. All heeding the message by the jailed Kremlin critic this week that scare tactics won't work. Lawyers arguing orders to put allies under house arrest are designed to stifle the protests.
Абсолютно естественно, что это политическое дело, оно не имеет ничего общего ни с законом, ни с правосудием. То есть, естественно, привлекаются только политические активисты, и, собственно, привлекаются они как раз за свою деятельность, за то, чем они занимаются.
Authorities targeting Mr. Navalny's allies abroad too, charging another aide, Leonid Volkov, in relation to last week's rallies, the largest in years.
В соответствии с выводами лингвистического исследования, в его высказываниях установлены призывы к несовершеннолетним, склоняющие их к участию в митингах.
As some of those detained were sent home, police announced plans to close down train stations and streets around the Kremlin, ahead of a second Sunday of planned rallies. And in other countermeasures, Russian state TV releasing its own video disputing Mr. Navalny's that went viral. That accused Vladimir Putin of building a nearly $2 billion palace with illicit money. Today, an unidentified man claiming instead it is a luxury hotel.
Здесь вот зашито, где проем, это будет центральный вход. Здесь будет зона регистрации гостей и идет расселение.
The messaging war over palaces and protests felt outside Moscow, hundreds of kilometres away in Tver. Last week's rallies were in support of Mr. Navalny and against President Putin. Support for the protests growing amid an economic slowdown. The president's losing popularity, says one woman. This won't end well for him. Mr. Navalny hoping, like revolutionary figures before him, dissent will again tomorrow be felt across the country. Christine Carney, SBS World News.
Bangladesh has begun moving hundreds more Rohingya refugees to a low-lying island in the Bay of Bengal, despite safety concerns. About 1,700 Rohingya arrived on the island of Bhasan Char yesterday, with more being transferred today. Human rights groups and aid agencies have expressed concern over the island's vulnerability to storms and flooding.
Rohingya refugees arrive in the port of Chittagong, the latest stop in a journey that began 3 years ago when they fled ethnic violence in Myanmar. It's the third group to be taken to Bhasan Char, a journey of several hours by boat. Bangladesh says all agreed to go voluntarily, wanting to swap this, the overcrowded, crime-ridden camps of Cox's Bazar, for this, purpose-built housing. This man at least backed the official line. Human rights groups dispute the rosy picture, alleging some refugees have been coerced.
I mean, I think what they're trying to do is create a fait accompli with enough Rohingya on the island that nothing can change. And our major concerns are that not everybody there is there voluntarily.
There's also concern about its location at the head of the Bay of Bengal.
You know, everybody recognizes that Bhasan Char is in a typhoon alley.
This is what's driving those fears. In 1991, a cyclone killed almost 140,000 people. A tenth of the population was left homeless, crops and livestock destroyed. Back then, Bhasan Char, or floating island, didn't even exist. Made up entirely of silt, it's emerged in the past 20 years. The government says it's built a sea wall to protect the refugees, along with housing for 100,000 people, schools, clinics, mosques and cyclone shelters. But it's been reluctant to allow aid groups to check on the situation. In a statement, the UN Refugee Agency said it emphasised that all movements to Bhasan Char must be voluntary. The crisis erupted in 2017 when hundreds of thousands fled Myanmar's western Rakhine state. More than 1 million Rohingya now live in sprawling camps in Bangladesh. Others took their chances at sea, voyages that often ended in tragedy. Efforts to begin repatriation to Myanmar have foundered, the Rohingya still fearful of returning. The search for safe harbour goes on. Nick Wells, SBS World News.
Protesters have marched in Melbourne demanding the release of people in immigration detention. The group rallied outside the Park Hotel where 14 men are still being detained. 46 people have been freed from the makeshift detention centre into the community on bridging visas in the past few weeks. Some of them have faced up to 6 years in detention.
When people come here seeking our help, we are obliged to treat them as humans.
Home Affairs says the released detainees are in Australia temporarily for medical treatment. The Thai government is under fire over its vaccine rollout after switching companies just 2 weeks out from its first phase. Thailand had originally chosen the Chinese Sinovac jab, but is now moving forward with AstraZeneca's inoculation instead. That vaccine is said to be produced locally later in the year by a firm owned by the Thai king.
Protesters gathered outside the offices of Siam Bioscience in Bangkok this week, accusing the government of being swayed by royal influence over its COVID-19 vaccine program. The company is owned by the king and now holds the exclusive contract to manufacture the Oxford AstraZeneca jab in Thailand, so far the only certified vaccine. That prompted the main opposition figure, who was banned from holding political office for 10 years by a court last year, to go public with what he saw as a flawed process.
Our question is whether this scheme gives too much benefit to one company or not.
A royal defamation complaint has been filed against Thanatorn for his criticism. But he's undeterred and says his concern is more than just possible collusion during contract negotiations. If anything were to go wrong with the vaccine manufacturing, the government's hands are tied.
You have legal immunity because the king is the head of the state. But as a vendor to the government contract, he is a shareholder of this company. And if things go wrong, the government cannot sue the owner of the company.
The Minister of Public Health says there's no room for politics when it comes to vaccines.
I fully believe and strongly believe that I have acquired the best, the most proper vaccine for Thai people. I will make sure that there will be no priority or privilege.
Siam Bioscience will ultimately manufacture the Oxford AstraZeneca jab for Thailand and the region, up to 200 million doses a year. It received $20 million in government funds to upgrade its facilities, part of a pandemic grant system. The jab will be free to all Thais and will run as a non-profit operation. But Siam Bioscience stands to substantially boost its revenue once the pandemic is over. Busy times at this Buddhist temple here in Bangkok's Chinatown as people come out to pray for good fortune ahead of the Lunar New Year. While recognizing the government's success in containing COVID-19, some are concerned about the vaccine rollout and the politics surrounding it.
I think that the vaccine plan is not clear. We still do not know if the vaccine is safe enough to use, and that's worrying some.
I don't know what the future holds. I think that this is a very early phase, and we won't find out the result of the vaccine immediately.
What the Year of the Ox will hold for the people of Thailand depends on controlling the virus and the success of its vaccine. And many people here praying for just that.
Australia has joined a chorus of international voices urging Myanmar to adhere to democratic norms following concerns over a possible coup. It comes after last year's November election, which the army claims was fraudulent and has threatened action if their complaints are not addressed. The election delivered a landslide victory to Aung San Suu Kyi's ruling party, and the country's election commission rejected any allegations of fraud. A joint statement backed by several countries, including Australia, New Zealand and the United States, warned the military against any regime change. Hong Kong residents can apply for a new visa from tomorrow, giving them the chance to become British citizens following China's crackdown in the former colony. But Beijing says the British National Overseas Passport category amounts to second-class citizenship, and China will no longer recognise the special passports already in use. UK government forecasts say the new visa could attract more than 300,000 people and their dependents to Britain.
To leave or to stay and fight. Like many protesters in Hong Kong, this is the decision a man we're calling H has had to make. And he has decided to go.
I had never thought that I would become a refugee, but now it has happened. There's no other way. There are greater fears if I stay here and do not leave.
We're concealing his identity out of fears of a backlash from the authorities. H was born 2 years before Britain handed back Hong Kong to China, so he has a British National Overseas Passport, a document that now opens a pathway to UK citizenship for him. He drives to the airport, through a city where for over a year he took part in increasingly violent protests, demanding more democracy and less Chinese influence. A movement stopped by a sweeping national security law and the arrest of its young leaders. And H's mother feared for her only child.
When can we reunite? I may not be able to see him for the rest of my life, but his safety is most important.
others like Arching, H's friend, have decided to stay.
I want to persevere to the last moment. Giving up on our home where we were born and grew up is not what we wanted.
After making that decision, he took to the streets again. It was after the introduction of the national security law. He was swiftly detained for unauthorized assembly. Police didn't press charges against him. And despite the risks, he wants to keep fighting.
Even though we feel lost, we have to keep going. We can only see the light of hope if we persevere.
Having made the decision to go, H feels he may never be able to go back. His battle now is to try and build a new life in Sheffield, a very different place.
Looking at what's happening in Hong Kong, especially I'm now on the other side of Earth, I feel helpless. It is very difficult to have a concrete, long-term plan. It is inevitable to feel lost.
China accuses the UK of meddling in its internal affairs, and in response announced it will no longer recognise BNO passports. Under the scheme, up to 5.5 million Hong Kongers have the right to move to the UK. They too have to make an agonising choice, to stay or to go.
And the former chairman of one of China's largest asset management companies has been executed following his conviction on bribery charges. Lai Xiaomin was found guilty of receiving or seeking bribes totalling $278 million between 2008 and 2018. A court in Tianjin also found him guilty of corruption and bigamy charges. It's one of the highest profile prosecutions since President Xi Jinping launched an anti-corruption campaign when he came into power in 2012. Well, the pandemic has had a devastating effect on businesses around the world, but in Italy, one famous local product has actually improved in the past year. Domestic sales and exports of Italian cheeses have soared, becoming so valuable it's even used as a guarantee for bank loans.
It doesn't look anything yet like its final, delicious and valuable form. Each of these vats will make 2 wheels of Parmigiano Reggiano that together are worth almost $1,000. A method that goes back generations, involving knowledge and passion.
There is the warming of the milk, then we add what's essentially a starter, which works to acidify and ferment the milk. Then we add a coagulant, and it becomes thick and rice-like, and the last part is the cooking.
It's a production line that has never stopped, despite coronavirus restrictions. These cows need to be milked on a daily basis. There is no option to stop, we're told.
We've had to readjust how we work as a company, so we started free home deliveries. The numbers to our domestic clients have seen a small increase. The export during this period, however, went up around 30%.
Lauren Heffron organises cycling tours for Americans in Italy, and like the rest of the world, that's had to stop.
Oh, I miss that. I mean, I miss the scenery, I miss the food, I miss the passeggiata. You know, there's not much that I don't miss, you know.
Now she imports Parmesan from this farm to her clients in the US.
Because Parmigiano is something you can't get it in the same way. You know, it's a story to tell. I've gotten this great Parmigiano. It's from a place that you all know from our trips.
It's also a very precise and controlled process. Every wheel is checked by the Parmesan Consortium before getting the official stamp of approval. It's so valued here that it's actually become a currency. It may surprise you, but this is a bank.
Usually, if you think of a bank vault, you may imagine bars of gold, but not here, just as precious. Endless rows of wheels of cheese, and it shows you just how valuable the product and the brand of Parmigiano Reggiano is.
This warehouse holds around $140 million worth of Parmesan.
Il Parmigiano Reggiano è così prezioso che
the cheese is so precious. The older it gets, the more it gains in value. And so the producers use it as a guarantee for bank loans.
It's a currency, an international name, a comforting and traditional family staple that people have wanted more of as they are forced to stay home, both here in Italy and even thousands of kilometres away.
Tasty. Well, the Dow Jones plunged 1,000 points this week after Reddit traders stormed the stock market in what's being dubbed the French Revolution of Finance. US regulators have vowed to investigate trading restrictions imposed by online brokerages and search for evidence of market manipulation as shares in video game retailer GameStop jump again.
Tonight, the SEC now reviewing that extreme volatility rocking Wall Street. Today, the Dow plunging more than 600 points.
It's really a casino atmosphere there.
But companies like AMC and GameStop saw their stocks shoot back up, with amateur investors buying again after trading apps like Robinhood lifted some restrictions. Frank Fritz decided to jump in.
It's a really weird time we're living in. I had never thought I would invest in stocks casually like that, but I saw the opportunity, downloaded the app on my phone and did it.
The newcomers going online to swap stock ideas with each other on Reddit and trade on apps like Robinhood. They've spent weeks buying up shares in struggling companies like GameStop, forcing powerful hedge funds betting against those same companies to pay to cover their bets.
The SEC will probably look at two things. One, to what extent do platforms have some sort of obligation to warn or to educate new investors about the risks of investing in these types of stocks? And two, does this type of volatility inject systemic risk into the markets?
And Wall Street's closing figures overnight saw a 2% slump across all the major indices for the day. The ramifications of Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine trials also spooked the market. Coming up next, all your Saturday sports news, including Ash Barty and a host of the world's best tennis players happy to get back on the court.
Chipping away, trying to do the best that I can every day, but it is bloody good to be back.
And Hitting the Beach, the new initiative teaching people living with disabilities how to ride waves.
Ernie is back at it again for another remarkable Australian adventure.
You're telling me that I have to go on a bloody bushwalk?
So take a journey through our own backyard, where time stands still and the people are full of passion.
What else do we need to do? Sit back, relax, enjoy the ride.
An absolute pleasure.
Going places with Ernie Dingo. Tonight, 7:30 on SBS and on demand.
You may think you've seen the unusual. You may think you've seen the bizarre. But I've never seen anything like this.
Wow!
Every day a new adventure. That's my motto.
February Fantasies starts with Sicilian Ghost Story, Monday 9:30 on SBS World Movies.
Sometimes, even the best tenants can cause damage to your investment property that standard building insurance may not cover. Terry Shear, Australia's leading landlord insurance specialist, provides the cover you need for your property and rental income. Have confidence that your investment property is in safe hands.
As a first-time investor, Terry Shear provides the security I need.
Call Terry Shear or go online.
Can you pop next door for some honey?
Our softest high-fibre, low-GI loaf is made for longer-lasting energy. Baker's Delight. Nice and simple.
It seems the world has met its end.
But the fight has only just begun. Where will you stand?
Discover new details about your family story with Ancestry DNA. Find out your ethnic mix, connect to family past and present, and discover what led to you. Order your kit at ancestry.com.au.
This is Frank.
He's an evacuee from London.
This is Miss Lamb, your new guardian. I don't want him. We've all got to do our bit.
Nobody knows how to be a parent. Why, you two? Gosh, you make quite a pair.
I knew it!
Whoa.
Oh my lord.
That's a lot of money.
Has my whole life been a lie, basically?
The brand new season, Who Do You Think You Are UK? Friday 8:30 on SBS and on demand. The streets of New York, where the American dream can turn into a gangster nightmare.
Bribery, extortion, murder.
Gangster movie season continues with Once Upon a Time in America, tonight at 9 on SBS.
For many children with autism, a trip to the beach to surf seems almost impossible until now. A new initiative by an Australian-based swim safety organisation is enabling surf instructors to teach people living with disabilities how to ride waves.
Sand and surf is a way of life for many Australians, and swimming in schools is compulsory in most states. But for kids with disabilities, the beach and pools pose a greater risk. Children with autism or ASD are 160 times more likely to die from drowning. But a new initiative aims to change that.
It's uncommon for us not to have a parent in tears every week, purely because their child is doing something that they never thought that they'd be able to do. It's so heartwarming. We see bonds being formed. We see people superseding expectations.
Autism Swim specialises in preventing those with disabilities from drowning. Through funding provided by the IMB Bank Community Foundation, the company was able to expand from swimming to surfing. This modified surf education activity provides water skills for people with autism and other disabilities.
It changes lives, basically. So we feel very blessed, and it's well, as you can see, the smiles, not only on Kate's face, but the volunteers.
How people help me.
The aim is to award surf instructors with a certification that qualifies them to teach students with autism how to stay safe around the water.
Exercises like this that are tailored to helping kids with autism feel comfortable on the sand and in the water will be rolled out across Sydney this year. If the program is successful, they hope to eventually expand across the country and the globe.
And it's these skilled volunteers that are working to achieve that goal, getting kids safely from the sand to the shore and into the sea.
The most rewarding part is just seeing the joy on the families' faces. It's not only a benefit to the participants, it's a benefit to the parents.
The initiative aiming to close the inequality gap and open up opportunities for those with autism. Danielle Robertson, SBS World News.
Well, there have been over 500 Indigenous deaths in custody in Australia since 1989, but no criminal homicide convictions and just a handful of charges. It's stats like these now motivating artists to create the installation Contested Space. They hope the cross-cultural collaboration will spark fresh discussions about the history and treatment of First Nations people.
A ghostly mob to mark an immense loss. A concrete shroud for each Indigenous Australian to die in detention since the 1991 Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody.
And, that's somebody's family, that's somebody's brother, somebody's sister or somebody's relation, somebody's parent.
For this Narrandjeri artist, painting the shrouds was an opportunity to honour the lives lost and the families still mourning.
It really brought some raw emotions up in me, and feelings that I thought, that I've dealt with, but really I'm still dealing with it, and, because I'm the only male left in my family now, and, I lost my two brothers who were both institutionalised.
The project sparking reflection on the processes that can lead to a death in custody.
They feel then so lonely, and so, that they don't matter anymore because, the racism that's been brought on them, or the, living in poverty, or, been taken from their family, or now suffering from alcohol and drug issues.
We need to talk about it. It has happened. It is ongoing. The damage is ongoing. And until we take that risk, and each of us go, well, how do we come to terms with our history, but it is also right now the present, so that we can create a future together.
This month, Human Rights Watch Global Report highlighted Australia's high rate of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander deaths in custody. In 2020 alone, 4 Indigenous detainees died in a Western Australian prison, 2 in Victoria and 1 in a Brisbane watch house. This artwork asks why.
If Aboriginal people were silent, who would talk about this? I think that's a question that we've got to honestly ask ourselves.
A confronting encounter with uncomfortable truths. Peter Doherty, SBS World News, Adelaide.
Time for the day in sport now with Lucy Zilliger. Lucy, Australia's top-ranked tennis player finally returns to the court.
And it's so good to see her, but not in the way I'm sure she would have liked, Daz. Good evening to you. World number 1 Ash Barty played her first competitive match in 11 months last night, although losing to Simona Halep. A crowd of 4,000 was in attendance to mark the official start of the professional tennis season. But that's just a small fraction of the fan attendance that can now be expected at next month's Australian Open.
It's appeared unlikely a few months ago, but Melbourne is now just a week away from hosting the biggest sporting event in the world since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Victorian government confirming crowd numbers permitted to attend this year's first Grand Slam.
You know, I think 390,000 people over a 2-week period, frankly, will be viewed by the rest of the world as nothing short of amazing.
Crowds will be capped at 30,000 a day for the first 8 days of the tournament, with that number reduced by 5,000 from the quarterfinals onwards. But interaction between players and spectators will no longer be permitted. COVID-19 putting a stop to one of the sport's longest-running traditions.
We're going to discourage anything that is going to create any further risk to health, and we will with the players as we will with the fans. That's why on site we're going to have enough signage, enough support from our staff to ensure that we maintain that safety for everyone.
It will be Ash Barty's first Grand Slam tournament since last year's Australian Open. The 24-year-old enduring a mixed return last night, losing to Simona Halep in a super tiebreaker. Returning from an extended layoff is nothing new for Barty, who took a year off to play cricket in 2015.
I've done it once before, so I've had a bit of practice. I know that I'm excited to get started, and if it's not good next week, it might be the week after, and if it's not the week after, I'll get another opportunity eventually. So just keep chipping away, trying to do the best that I can every day, but it is bloody good to be back.
Rafael Nadal and Dominic Thiem also enjoying their first hit out this summer, the Spaniard securing a straight sets victory. Adrian Archuli, SBS World News.
So good to see them back on the court. Well, to football, and there were plenty of chances, but tonight's A-League clash between Melbourne Victory and Western United has ended in a goalless draw. Alessandro Diamanti came closest to a winner for United. The Italian hit the woodwork twice in the second half. Dylan Pereas thought he had finally broken the deadlock, but he was adjudged to be offside. The video assistant referee denying Marco Rudan's side twice. One of the NRL's biggest stars, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, is switching codes, signing a deal with New Zealand Rugby. The Warriors captain has been granted an early release from his contract and will leave the club at the end of this season. The 27-year-old admits it will be a challenge to force his way into the All Blacks squad.
You know, I've been getting a lot of people saying you go into the All Blacks, but that's a bit disrespectful to a brand like that. So you just, my whole thing is just to go back and play rugby.
The next Rugby Union World Cup is in 2023. Four-time All-Australian Karen Paxman has lifted the Demons to a come-from-behind opening round win in the AFLW. Melbourne kicked 5 unanswered goals in the second quarter and didn't let the Gold Coast Suns back into the contest. Paxman finished with a game-high 25 disposals. The Phoenix won their first ever NBL game in Perth last night. American import Kiefer Sykes put South East Melbourne ahead with 4 seconds to play against the Wildcats. The defending champions had a golden chance to snatch victory, but club veteran Jesse Wagstaff missed an open layup as time expired. Wildcats coach Trevor Gleeson refused to blame the 34-year-old for the defeat.
Well, it's not that play, it's all the other plays beforehand. You know, we started the third quarter and 0-9 run against us. You know, it wasn't urgency. We weren't playing team basketball or team defence that we're known for, so we shouldn't have been in that situation.
The Phoenix face Melbourne United tomorrow, but the Wildcats' clash with the Breakers has been postponed due to a number of New Zealand players feeling unwell. To golf, and Adam Scott is one shot off the lead at the halfway point of the USPGA Tour event in San Diego. The Australian carded a 3 under 69 in the second round and sits at 8 under. Lorna Rossa will battle Team UK for the right to take on defenders Team New Zealand in the 36th America's Cup. The Italian team completed a 4-0 sweep of American Magic in the semi-finals of the Challenger Series. The 13-race final begins on the 13th of February. How cool's this? Tasmanian cyclist Richie Port has become just the 5th person to be presented with a key to the city of Launceston. Port was honoured at a public ceremony today. It follows his 3rd place finish at last year's Tour de France.
Last year was fantastic, and I do feel the support from everybody here who stays up until sort of 3 a.m. in the morning and supports me. So it's been a hell of a journey.
Good on you, Richie. Other athletes to receive the award include cricketer Ricky Ponting and boxer Daniel Gill. And finally, a man has been arrested in New Zealand after jumping onto the track during a horse racing meet near Wellington. Jockeys somehow managed to avoid hitting the man, preventing a serious incident. The man is likely to be charged with endangering public safety, according to a police spokeswoman. Absolute miracle that he survived that, Darren.
Certainly very dicey, Luz. Thanks. Coming up next, the weather and the perfect pair. A zoo welcomes the birth of 2 endangered tiger cubs.
Ernie is back at it again for another remarkable Australian adventure.
An absolute pleasure.
Going places with Ernie Dingo. Starts next on SBS.
Not only are we sleeping less, we are sleeping worse.
Are we sleepwalking into a sleep crisis?
The link between sleep and weight is getting stronger.
Michael Mosley, The Truth About Sleep. Thursday, 8:30 on SBS and on demand.
Unlike other modems, Telstra's smart modem is cleverly backed up by Australia's best 4G network. So if the connection to your house stops, your home Wi-Fi won't. Switch today to experience Australia's most reliable home Wi-Fi with the Telstra Smart Modem.
With the world turned on its head, many of us aren't feeling like ourselves. But what happens in your head doesn't have to stay there. There are things we can do to feel better, like staying connected, keeping busy, and being active. How's your head today? For info, advice and professional support, visit headtohealth.gov.au. Authorised by the Australian Government, Canberra.
It seems the world has met its hand. But the fight has only just begun. You have been chosen for a purpose. Where will you stand?
If your home is in need of a rebuild after an unfortunate event, GIO Classic Home Insurance Safety Net is now offering you up to 25% extra cover, free for the first year on new policies. So if the cost of rebuilding exceeds the amount your home is insured for, you'll have some extra cover to help everything come up roses. Hey, get out of there. But hurry, offer ends 28 February 2021. You know, with GIO.
My name's Max McLaughlin.
Why exactly are you here?
To help organize the German police force.
This war is not over. Just entered another phase.
Celebrity chef Robert Oliver is joined by talented cooks as they compete in the Revolution Kitchen to become the Pacific's best. Pacific Island Food Revolution starts tonight 7:30 on SBS Food and On Demand. There's a world of stories available for free at SBS On Demand. Download the app or visit the website today. SBS On Demand, a world of difference.
A severe weather warning has been issued in WA's Kimberley region as a developing tropical low threatens to intensify into a cyclone. Communities in the West Kimberley and coastal Pilbara have been told to stay alert, with flooding and gusts of up to 85 kilometres an hour expected. Currently tracking over land down the coast, the Bureau of Meteorology has warned the low could become a Category 2 cyclone if it ventures over water. To the forecast, and a monsoon trough and lows are generating heavy rain and storms across the northern tropics. A broad trough is also causing storms and rain in northern Western Australia, the Northern Territory, Western Queensland and eastern New South Wales. In the major centres, rain in Darwin, a shower or two in Brisbane and Sydney, a possible shower in Canberra. Partly cloudy in Melbourne and Hobart, sunny in Adelaide and Perth. Looking further afield, partly cloudy in Auckland, fine in Wellington, a few showers in Samoa, thunder in Nadi. In Southeast Asia, partly cloudy in Bangkok, drizzle in Jakarta, thunder in Kuala Lumpur, rain in Port Moresby. Further north, fine in Beijing, rain in Hanoi, partly cloudy in Hong Kong, cloudy in Seoul, fine in Tokyo. Heading west, fine in Baghdad, a few showers in Beirut, partly cloudy in Delhi and Islamabad, fine in Mumbai. To Europe, cloudy in Athens, partly cloudy in Berlin, overcast in Istanbul, rain in London, snow in Moscow. In Africa, fine in Addis Ababa and Cairo, partly cloudy in Dhaka, thunder in Johannesburg, overcast in Lagos, cloudy in Nairobi. Over to South America, thunder in Asunción, cloudy in Bogota, rain in Buenos Aires, partly cloudy in Panama City. And for North America, cloudy in New York, snowy in Chicago, fine in Los Angeles, snow in Toronto, and sunny in Mexico City. Well, finally tonight, and no, you're not seeing double. These Amur Tiger Cub twins are the new additions at the Cleveland Metro Parks Zoo in the US. The pair, a gift for keepers, born overnight between Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. This new vision was taken as they're hand-reared by a special team of animal care experts. Amur tigers are an endangered species. It's estimated there are only 400 or 500 left in their native home in Russia's Far East and northeastern China. Beautiful. That's the world this Saturday. If you missed some of tonight's bulletin, you can catch up on the SBS News website shortly. And a reminder, you can also watch the bulletin live there or on our app. I'm Darren Mara. Thanks for your company from the team. Good night.